I'm Maria Menounos, and you're tuned in to AfterBuzz TV, the ESPN of TV talk. Now, let the buzz begin.
Hey everybody, it's Loren Kling. Welcome to another AfterBuzz episode of World on Fire After Show. This is Season 1, Episode 5. I am joined, as always, by Toree Weaver. How are you, Toree?
I'm good. Hey guys, super excited to talk with you guys because we're coming up on the season finale and there's so much going on.
Yes, and I gotta say, before we start, I want to compliment you, Toree, and myself on our choice of nice color backdrops. And we're dressed in clothes befitting of people who normally go out and about outside. This is not the kind of show you wear pajamas to when you're reviewing.
Yeah, no, definitely not. You have to, come polished.
Right. Now, maybe part of the reason is this is a PBS show. Maybe it's a Masterpiece Theater, and Masterpiece and PBS have always been tied with our grandparents. But look at us, Toree. We're now old enough to watch PBS and Masterpiece Theater. Don't tell anyone this camera's not on, is it?
Right. It's like, I'm old enough to really watch PBS Masterpiece and enjoy it.
You know what? These are strange times, so it's okay. But we are talking about a phenomenal show called
Yeah.
World on Fire. We're on episode 5. You are a lover of period pieces, so this has got to be right up your alley. How does this fit into other shows you've watched before? Have you seen things like this?
I have, and I will say that this might be one of the more fast-paced ones that I've seen. A lot of the other period pieces, they kind of like really lay it on thick with the groundwork and just kind of like setting the scene and where everything is. And just so as the series goes on, you're kind of like almost already in it. This one is a little bit faster, I guess, because it's a limited series, so we don't have a lot of time to kind of set that groundwork, but they're packing it all in there.
They are. Now, this episode, the theme of this would be, I'd call it shell shock. We see Harry and his men find a group of soldiers as they're heading towards Dunkirk, and they find Jeff and the other men. We see Harry's father back home hit shell shock of his own, trying to find out what's happening with his son, Tom. It really pulls at your heartstrings seeing people not able to control the outside world, kind of like what we're living in today. We're all experiencing this COVID thing in different ways. How are you seeing this episode with everybody facing these things they can't help themselves with?
I think you kind of hit the nail on the head. It was just really like pulling at your heartstrings to watch. I mean, even before the pandemic was happening, it just kind of touches me personally because of just, I think we all kind of know a war veteran or have someone in our families, related to one or know of one. And it is pretty sad, like seeing what happens after the war is over, after they've served their time, because some people aren't fortunate enough to have housing. They're not really fortunate enough to have a peace of mind. They're triggered by a lot of things that normally we wouldn't even consider like alarming or triggering or anything like that. They have paranoia, and there's just so many symptoms that we see, and it's unfortunate because you have these soldiers, risking their lives to serve our country and protect us, and they come back, and it's just kind of like their mind is kind of either set there, or they're not able to financially provide for themselves anymore. And it was just kind of hard to watch because you kind of saw all of that play out on the screen. Of course, we haven't seen the outcomes of the war and how veterans will actually react when the war is finally over, but we're kind of seeing it, we're kind of seeing the beginning works of that. And it was just really sad to see.
Yeah, it is hard to watch. Now, at the same time, we see Harry kind of take charge, and I think that surprises his Sergeant Stan, who doesn't know really what to do, because before Harry kind of froze, had shell shock, kind of froze, and it was up to his Sergeant Stan to take care of things. Were you surprised Harry finally came into his own, or did you kind of think this was going to happen?
I knew that it was going to happen eventually. I just wasn't sure in what shape, way, form, or fashion. And honestly, when we first saw that he was in the war and that he had kind of like a higher up position, I was like, how did he get this position? Because clearly, like, he's not really making the calls on his own. He feels really uncomfortable in these situations. He kind of needs to lean on everyone, which is fine. But it was just kind of like, are you sure you're the right person to lead everyone? You know what I mean? But it was nice to kind of see him find his own way and find his own leadership skills, even if everybody doesn't agree, or, there might be a better way. He's kind of figuring out and standing on his 2 feet. And I think that was something that we were going to see because we kind of know what type of character Harry is. I just didn't know what way we were going to see that.
Yeah, I think what we notice notice about a lot of the characters as they're coming into their own, they're evolving, I think is the word. So not only are we seeing Harry evolve, we're seeing Lois evolve. She meets up with this guy Vernon, tells a stranger her story. um I thought that was interesting. So now we're kind of seeing her decide she needs to figure out what she wants to do with her life. Do you think Lois is looking for a man, whether it's Vernon or anybody else?
I don't think so, honestly. I don't think she's really even thinking about it. I don't think she's thinking about a man. I think she's really just taking it day at a time, as I know a lot of us are dealing with this pandemic. Just kind of you wake up and you tackle the day as it comes. I don't necessarily think that like Lewis has a plan because anytime anyone asks her, she's just kind of like avoiding the question or doesn't want to talk about it or makes it clear that like she hasn't figured it out completely. And I just think that she's trying to take it day by day, even though the days are ticking and it looks like she's due soon. So I mean, she'll have to make a decision. But a part like this much part of me like wants her to get back with Harry. You know, I know that's bad because he has a wife. I don't know why I want that to work out. I haven't figured that out for myself, but I just feel like they have to end on better terms.
Yeah. Now we did have a meetup of two characters, and I'm looking through my notes. It was Webster, who was working at the French Field Hospital when Harry comes in. So that was the first time. We don't really see the story a lot with Douglas. Sorry, not with Douglas. With Webster and Albert. We see little bits and pieces of that story, but I curious what's going to happen with them because I feel like right now this is the love story that we have in this show. Lois is not with Harry. Everyone's Kaja's not with Harry. So they're the only two right now that I think really we can kind of want them to stay together. And do you, I hate to ask
Yeah.
this, but do you think there might be some things that happen that separate those two before the season ends?
Oh, for sure. For sure. I honestly, like, I was thinking about it before we went on air, and I was like, I don't think this has a happy ending for almost anybody. Truly. Like, I really don't. And of course, like, I want it to be, but just thinkingly, no, knowing that this is a period piece and they're saying pretty accurate to like things that are happening and making sure that like real life events are influencing what's happening in the TV drama. I just
Mhm.
don't think, I think something is going to happen. I don't know. I don't know. Cause like sometimes we don't see them a lot. So I'm like, okay, maybe this is just kind of like a sprinkle of joy. So they'll continue to be the sprinkle of joy and they'll figure it out and it'll be fine. And that'll be like the only thing that works out in this show. And then other times I'm like, but then again, we really aren't seeing anything. So is it like enough to keep them together if something were to happen? You know what I mean? Like if this tragic events happen that splits them up, I'm curious to see if there's enough depth in between them to keep them together.
Right. Yeah, definitely. So going to Lois's brother, Tom, who's back in the service. So it seems like these episodes jump ahead a little bit. He's back in the service. He's at Dunkirk picking up soldiers at the beach. Um, that was another interaction between two characters who finally meet. It was Tom and then Kaja's brother, right? It's
Hmm.
Kaja's brother who cuts the line and just wants to get the hell out of there. He's the only one left.
Yeah.
Um, so I'm curious what's going to happen with him because, the British soldiers, excuse me, the British soldiers on the beach kind of told him, get in the back of the line. And that was kind of the setup to later on him being told, you get out of here, being called
Hmm.
a name for being not British. And Harry had to step in to say, we are all soldiers here.
Yeah. It every time I see Kaja's brother, I'm just like, oh gosh, what is happening? Because he's like you said, he's the only one left of like his, I don't know, like group of people, and he doesn't really know what's going on. He didn't, want this lifestyle or whatever in the first place. Like he didn't really want to go fight anything. And so just seeing him, and we already knew that when he was thrown in the fire and just kind of like put under that pressure, he pretty much cracked, couldn't stop coughing, couldn't keep up, was crying uncontrollably. So it's just kind of like every time I see him wandering, I'm just like, somebody please just like take him and tuck him somewhere because this is just not where he wants to be. And even though like no place is safe at this point, I think it'd just be a little bit better if he was able to at least find a place that he was comfortable, knew a familiar face or something, because this boy has been through a lot.
Yeah. I know, definitely. All right. So let's talk about the other person besides Jeff, who Harry was taking care of out in the field, who had suffered from shell shock, but Douglas Bennet. Now, I'm really curious, Toree, what you think about Douglas going to Rabina's house. I know that he really wants to see Jan, and part of me feels like he just wants the connection with a child because his two children are grown up. Part of me wonders if he wants to have a connection with Rabina because of Lois's child, perhaps. Do you see that same reason that he's there?
Yeah. Oh yeah, for sure. I see it. Like you said, I think you touched on all of them. I think he just kind of like, okay, even though everyone else involved seems to not want this to come together. I mean, we know that this baby is coming. I think he's doing it so that, Harry's mom can see that even though she might not really have ran with that crowd back in the day, like they're, we're all people. They deserve the same level of as respect, even if they're not in the same social class or have the same beliefs. Like you said, I think he does want that connection, especially with the little boy, because I think in this episode, we definitely see how he kind of feels like he's in some sort of way failed as a father for what he's done to his son. And I think like having that second opportunity to kind of get it right, in a sense, he's trying to take full advantage. And I think that's something that him and Rabina are connecting with, because I think she also is getting that second chance of having a son because she wasn't always the best with Harry. I mean, we kind of are reminded every episode that their relationship isn't the best. So I think they're both connecting to this child to kind of redeem themselves.
Yeah, definitely. The last thing I want to talk about for the episode is Herr Rossler. Boy, what the OMFG did you think? Did you ever expect him to take out that woman in his shop and then go to Nancy and then see them both dump a body into the river? That to me was the biggest surprise of this whole series.
Loren, let me tell you something, and this is embarrassing, but I'm going to admit it here right now. When he first got the letter from the party, tell me why I tried to pause the TV so I can read what it said. Loren, it was not in English. I don't know what I thought I was going to read. I was just like, oh my goodness, like I had to figure out what this says so I can really like, get into it. I wanted to know what it said so that I didn't have to, use context clues. I was like, yes, let me pay attention to details. Loren, I couldn't read a thing. It wasn't in English, so I don't even know why. I really like paused it, walked up to the TV, was really trying to read it, waste of time. But I will say that like I kind of gathered, what it said or whatever after I pressed play again, and I was not expecting that at all. Like I knew that he was paranoid when she said that she was going to, tell the authorities or whatever about his daughter, but I wasn't sure how he was going to handle it. Like I knew he was going to do something to try to protect his child, but never did I think that he was going to kill her, basically. And I was like, and I don't think that he knew that he was going to kill her either. I think he just I think we talk about it all the time, that fight or flight instinct that you have. And I think fight or flight mixed in with being a protective parent, I think the two of those things just kind of took over his decision making. And he was like, I need to do whatever is necessary to make sure that my child is okay. And I don't think that was his initial plan, but I think it just kind of like, it was almost like innate, like instinctively, that's what happened because he didn't want anything to happen to his kid. And I mean, if anything, Nancy's probably the only person that he knows that wouldn't say anything. I mean, besides his wife, because she wants to protect the kid too. But I think even though they haven't gotten along, I think he knows that he knows where Nancy's beliefs lie. Like he knows that she's not, she just knows where she fits into this equation. And I'm not really sure if he could have called on anyone else, especially without his phones being tapped or being suspicious or anything like that. I think Nancy was probably the safest bet.
Yeah, that was really a surprise moment. Now you joke about trying to pause the TV to look at the letter. I paused the TV when the leaflets were dropped from the airplane. I actually paused it so I could write it down again for the insight. Oh my gosh.
Yes.
What is wrong with us?
I paused it at that area too. I was like, okay, maybe this one is in English, because I just felt like I had to.
Yeah, I think it makes more sense why I watch these shows for AfterBuzz alone, not with my wife. Otherwise, I'd be taking notes and rewinding, and she'd be like, "What are you doing?" And I'm like, "No, I need to know."
We have to digest this. Like we
I
really
know,
have to get
I
into
know,
it.
I know. So anything else you want to talk about before we move into special segments and news about this episode?
I don't know. There's just so much going on, and I feel like honestly, I'm going to save my topics for our predictions because I'm eager to know what you think is going to happen at the
Okay.
end of this.
Got it. All right. So before we get to special segment, we want to give a shout out to all of you watching us here on AfterBuzz. Not only this show, but all of the shows that we produce, the after shows and the entertainment shows, the stories, the articles that we are writing every day. We've got a quarantine with the stars. So the reason why all of us are doing this is because we love TV just like you. We love to be in the know, and we want to thank you guys so much. So we are going to drop leaflets from airplanes, and it's going to be your job. No, I'm just kidding. We want to say thank you for being with us. If you want to leave a comment on these YouTube videos, if you're listening us on iTunes or your favorite media player, give us a shout out. Reach out to us on social media, AfterBuzz TV on Twitter and Instagram. So thank you guys for watching. Toree and I will give out our Instagram and other social media at the end, which means you have to wait until the end. Cool. All right, let's move on to our special segment with Toree Weaver.
Yes, so our special segment is here, which is where we talk about our unsung heroes in wars and battles and everything alike. And today's unsung hero is Eileen Nern, and she actually reminds me of one of the characters that's in the show, so I was super excited to talk about her. She grew up in France and eventually ran away to Britain after the German invasion. Knowing that she was, fluent in French, she actually became a spy for the Special Operations Executive and went under the name of Rose. They sent her back to France because she spoke French, and she actually was in charge of a radio line between London and Paris to arrange weapon drop-offs. Now, after a while of doing this, she was actually captured and tortured, and all the times that she was tortured, she did not reveal her real name or her association with anything, any informants or anything. She escaped, she was captured again, tortured, and she repeated this process until the United States actually found her and rescued her, and she didn't pass until 2010. So that was a pretty interesting fact. Like I said, she never cracked, never revealed her name until she was safe. So that was pretty cool, and she kind of reminds me of Kasha.
Wow. That's amazing. Thank you. I love these insights into people. And I want to share an article that also talks about people that are normally overlooked. So this is from denofgeek.com. And the article is by Amanda Ray Prescott. And it's called World on Fire Returns People of Color to the Dunkirk Narrative. So we know that there was the movie Dunkirk that came out last year. And so while we know that story has been told, World on Fire places back in the picture the Black soldiers that other wartime dramas have erased. And we've kind of touched on the fact that there are a lot more people of color in this series than we've seen in similar series past. In an interview for the BBC, the screenwriter Peter Bowker said that he deliberately set up to tell stories that weren't traditional war stories, the ones we've always heard, ones that have been largely untold, like the two French-speaking Senegalese soldiers with the red kind of fez caps. I don't ever remember hearing stories about the Senegalese. And, both the British and French troops found people in Asia and the Caribbean and Africa to help build their troops. In fact, the British Indian Army was critical in repelling Mussolini from Libya and Tunisia. Troops from West Africa helped the British recapture Burma. Even fighting against the Japanese. And a lot of these troops are known as the Forgotten Army because their contributions were frequently overlooked. So I found this article after watching the episode this morning, and I was like, yeah, you know what? You're right. There's a lot of stories that we don't normally hear. We hear about the British, we hear about the French, we hear about the Americans. But what's interesting is this story is not American centric. That's something we're used to when we see these kind of movies. So one other thing that the screenwriter said, he said, um, the reason why he did this because of our current preoccupations with nationality and borders and refugees and what constitutes a genuine refugee and what constitutes genuine need. And we kind of were reminded of that in the episode when some of the British soldiers were trying to keep those Sinhalese officers from getting on the boats. And here he's like, no, they are soldiers like us. And so, you know, we still see in these episodes, you know, some people not wanting to let others, not their own, on board. But I'm glad to see these new stories being told.
Yeah, and also it's good to see. I think that's something that's remarkable about World on Fire is that it reveals, even though some people, I don't know why people don't believe that these things happen at the same time. I think that sometimes when we look at stories that actually do, you know, focus on the unsung heroes or minorities, it kind of seems like it's all happening separately, or that like it's just like this history is over here and this history is over here. And I think World on Fire does a good job of saying like, no, this was all happening at the same time. I don't know. I feel like sometimes when we thinking about race specifically, it's just kind of like people think that, you know, Black people were picked up in Africa and just dropped here. And then like the soldiers from Great Britain just came over here, lost and went back, and that's all they did. Or I think like sometimes we think about history in these isolated ways. And so we can't see how everyone has like overlapped and bridged together. And then these concepts, when we see them on World on Fire, they seem like these new innovative concepts. So really that's the way that it played out. And I think that cinema has portrayed it, it's, you know, just encouraged the idea that all these things were different moving pieces and not just a part of one big machine. And I think World on Fire, like it does a beautiful job of saying like, no, people didn't just drop out of thin air. Like they were people that belonged to the LGBTQIA plus community way before, you know, now when people are more accepting, like this was always a thing and this was always a part of our history, whether you choose to accept it or not. And I like how World on Fire pushes that and just kind of like doesn't feed into what people think really happened.
Yeah. As soon as you said it's always been there, I was like, yes, it's always been there. There's always been stories of other people who we have not heard. So thank you. Props to the writers of World on Fire. All right. Before we wrap up, let's go to predictions.
I am so curious to hear what you think is going to happen, because I wasn't sure how many episodes there were. I don't know why I keep thinking that like TV series are just going to last forever or something like that. I think it's because I'm used to binge watching. So like I'm used to 3 seasons at a time. But we're coming up on the season finale. And I think we only have like 2 or 3 episodes left. And I'm curious to hear your opinion, Loren, how do you think this is going to play out? Like, do you think we're going to get any happy endings? Like, what do you think?
Well, if I know my history correct, the war ends in 1939. Hitler is defeated and America gets the Spanish flu. I think that's right. No, that's not. That's totally wrong. Oh my gosh. Well, I jokingly say that because it's hard to separate the actual history from what we think will happen in the show. So when you take a scripted series like Better Call Saul or Breaking Bad, you're relying on somebody else to tell a story that you've not heard before. I feel with this one, it's telling an existing story of something you think you've heard in a different way. So if I'm trying to think, I know you've talked about and wanted Kaja and Harry to meet back up. I don't think Kaja's story is over. Oh, but didn't you predict that Harry would actually find Kaja in Poland or somewhere out there?
Yeah.
So I do think that at some point, Harry and the British soldiers are going to make their way and they're going to meet up somewhere. So I'm curious about that. I think about Webster and Albert. It's really too early to tell. I guess Albert is now kind of volunteering and finding his own working with.
Well, no. Yeah, they just floating around being happy. I don't know.
I feel like I've said a lot, but not even answered your question.
I mean, because like you said, it feels like it's too early, but we're already almost at the end. So it's like, oh, what is going to happen? And the only reason why I was curious is because, of course, like we know how the war ends. And of course, like when you look at it on black and white, you see that there's a victor, a loser, someone's defeated, someone wins, great. But there's so many casualties and things that happen underneath both of those umbrellas. Like just because the team side, country, militia wins doesn't mean that, they had their list of casualties, and the side that loses has their minor victories as well. So I was wondering if this is going to be kind of like a black and white, okay, those on this side are going to have this happy ending, those on this side won't, or if they will actually kind of play to reality and say, like, even though this is the big idea of what happened, these tragic things also happened underneath here. Because I mean, these are still in the series, they're still everyday people. Like things can happen. They're not, right, generals and things like that. So we're not really sure what happens. So that's why I was curious, because I'm like, wow, this could still end tragic, even though we know how this is going to end, right, war-wise.
Well, the first season is 1939. At least what we've been told is season 2 will be 1940. The United States didn't even enter the war until 1941. Roosevelt did not want to get America into the war. And so if we're looking at a first season that's not even close to bringing in American forces, right, it's trying to figure out, well, how far into the story in Europe are we going to get? Nancy reported that Germany had basically said that France was giving up. So we know Germany is on their way to Britain. I'm curious how far this season, when in 1939 this season is going to end, when in 1940 it's going to pick back up. So yeah, a lot of questions as to but so this was episode 5, and I think there's 3 more episodes.
It's a lot.
I do want to make a prediction that Lois will have her child before the end of the season.
Yeah, I think so too. Honestly, it was like at one point we were just finding out that she was pregnant, and now she looks like she's about to pop. So I'm like, okay, that's the one thing that I will say, that sometimes I wish this show, like, in other period pieces, it'll kind of have like that pretty font at the bottom, and it'll give you like the year and the location, or maybe like the year and the battle. I was like, sometimes I need a little bit more direction of where we are, what month is it, where are we at, and who is there. But I mean, as you keep watching, you kind of see where it is. But sometimes I'm like, wait a minute, is she about to have this baby today?
Well, you know what? My dad is a huge history buff, and definitely World War II. So maybe we can bring him on so he can talk for 2.5 hours trying to explain to his son Loren everything that we might have missed and I might have missed. But I don't want to torture you with my father's retelling of the entire history of World War II, Toree.
He'd probably give us a lot of insight. He's probably like, you guys missed this part. And I'm like, I'm sorry. I was trying to read the telegraph and missed the lady walking by.
I know, but we can tell him what we think about what Albert is wearing and what Lois is wearing. So maybe we can, surprise him with that info. All right. Before we go, Toree, where can people find you on the socials?
Yes, you guys can find me on Instagram at Toxic Model, or on Twitter at Toree with 2 E's.
Perfect. And you can find me on Instagram at Loren Kling, LorenKling. And from all of us at AfterBuzz TV, we will see you next week for episode 6 of World on Fire. Bye, everyone.
Our founder, Kevin Undergaro, and me, Maria Menounos, would like to thank you for tuning in to AfterBuzz TV. Remember, we're not just the first, we're the biggest in the world, and we're the only destination for all your favorite TV shows. Whatever you crave, we've got it. So go to AfterBuzzTV.com and check out our lineup. Buzz you later.
The views expressed herein are those of the hosts only and do not necessarily reflect the views of AfterBuzz TV or its owners or principals.